three words that Collingwood supporters have looked for the past probably 8 or 9 weeks have been gifted to us today. Jesse White omitted. It's exciting. Is it the right call this week? This also coming on a day when Malthouse formally announces potential candidacy for the Adelaide job and the Lions wanting a priority pick. Could it have been a more, shall I say, hilarious day? GC, how are you?
Very well, very well. Yeah, there's a few issues floating, isn't there?
Look,
Blairy's going to be the other one.
Blair is the interesting one that's been dropped evidently from the team. The wider AFL issue at the moment, which I'd like to touch on at some point, is the Adam Goods incident that everyone's spoken about this week that we'll get to in a few moments' time. But Jesse White, I mean, of all the weeks to drop him, he didn't play. I don't think it was too bad on the weekend. 2 goals, took a bit of the heat off Das and allowed Das to kick 5 goals. And this certainly wouldn't have been the week that I was dropping him.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's always got his critics, and he did drop marks that you would have hoped he'd take. But I still get back to thinking he's doing what our best expectation, or not our best, our most expected expectation was. He's a bit of a spud, but he's fulfilling a role, and he did that again on the weekend. I just think leaving more isolated is a dangerous move. I think it's just a bit much for a young bloke to be thrust into that role myself. Because
now the kid's going to be the number one banana, and with Brodie Grundy looking to be the obvious second fiddle / resting ruckman, it's no longer the land of the giants we were talking about a couple of weeks ago, I guess. But even so, we've still kept the slowest movers out of that quartet of big men in the side, and the most athletic of them has been pushed out in favour of largely a smaller lineup. So it's an interesting call.
And the ruckmen haven't really fulfilled a goal kicking role as such. So I think Tom McDonald will be licking his lips, because I think one thing he'd be saying is, I'm not going to let this kid show me up, and if we don't have to worry about it too much else around there, we're just going to concentrate on more and give him everything we can give him.
Certainly going to be an interesting game. We'll chat about that a little bit later on. Magpie Girl, how are you this evening?
Oh, I'm hanging in there, Mighty T. Mm-hmm.
I trust you're busy getting our exclusive interview up and posted online.
I am. I'm endeavouring to live up to that wonderful female skill of multitasking.
And you do it so well.
I have to say, it is hard to listen and write at the same time. I am struggling a tiny bit with that.
There's a couple of girls I'd like you to run that concept by, Magpie Girl, for me.
Well, look, as I said, we'll try and keep things easy on you tonight, and just feel free to let us know when we're saying the wrong thing about some of your favourite players, especially about Sammy Dwyer, which I'll get to a bit later on. Let's talk about the Bulldogs game and how bitterly disappointed. Well, I certainly am with the result. It was season on the line sort of stuff. And despite the fact that there is still a mathematical possibility of making finals, and there's still a good chance we may make finals, these are the sorts of games that you would have expected us to win. But I think we were thoroughly outclassed for the majority of the piece. What do you think, GC?
Yeah, I agree entirely. I mean, I think we were lucky to be as close as we were. They were clearly the better side. And I think they're one of the benchmarks we should be comparing ourselves to, because I think they've got a similarly young team and they've got a lot of good young kids. So they're going to develop along with us. And, I think they're ahead of us developmentally. I think we may be a fraction younger, but, they've got as good a list as we've got, I think, and they just demonstrated that they are a bit more advanced than us, I think, on the weekend.
But it was also a selection table thing. I mean, I think they would have taken note of what happened with the Port Adelaide game, how Port Adelaide kind of ran us around, especially for that first quarter and a bit. They went out and they dropped their marquee forward in Tom Boyd last week and deliberately went small and quick against us. And I think that this is really not an indictment on the selection committee, but there have been a couple of questionable choices. I mean, there's still time to make late changes when teams come out. And I don't think we responded the right way to the Dogs. I mean, as you say, we look at the scoreboard, we only lost by a few goals, but it should have been a bit more than that given their control of play.
Yeah. And the other thing, I think we had a bit of an insight into what to expect, because when we played them in the NAB Challenge earlier in the year, they did something very similar to us. They really ran and outclassed us. So we'd been taught that lesson once, and I don't think I think you're right. We didn't learn a great deal from it because we really fronted up with the same plan again.
Fascinating. Look, it was a fascinating game to watch, and a few things really stood out for me. Obviously, the brilliance of young Darcy Moore was on show, and we got a glimpse into the future, into what he can do with his 5 goals, not only from marks but on the run. And he seemed like a good competitor, which is something that that competitive edge is something you need to see from a key forward, which gives them that extra step. But on the negative, we really did get pulled apart in defence, allowing so many uncontested marks inside 50. The zoning defence game that we were playing just allowed holes to pop up absolutely everywhere. And really, that needs to be rectified by the time we come up against Melbourne this Saturday.
Yeah, I think they did. I think from that came from the midfield, got on top of us, and they just basically said they just poked holes in us all the way down into the forward line, and we just seemed a bit powerless. But very much like the NAB Challenge match, we seemed to be powerless to stop them, and it's something Buckley needs to really address.
There was criticism bandied about the board about a couple of guys in particular. Jared Blair, who's now been dropped, but the other one that really copped a fair bit of flack was Alan Tuvey. He probably hasn't been at his best the last few weeks, and he has conceded a lot of goals. What are your thoughts on his form at the moment?
I thought he wasn't too bad actually on the weekend. I thought he was one of the ones I would have said. He and Tom Langdon and probably Marley Williams wasn't too bad. I like Tuvey, and I think there's a real problem with getting rid of too much experience.
Yeah.
Jared Blair's. I've been a strong supporter of Blair, but I think it's the right time for him to go out. I think he's, it won't hurt him to go back and reassess himself and see if the next.
He was playing really well.
Pardon?
Why? He was playing really well.
He has been, but he's dropped off the last few weeks, and I don't think
he's been sub the last couple of weeks. So.
Pardon?
Because he's been made sub the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, but he's had a fair run at, in the week before. I think he had 3 quarters, and he had a fair run at it. I just look. I'm a fan of Blairy's, but I think he's just reached the point where it's reasonable to say, look, go back to the seconds and have another try and see what the next group of blokes can do, because he's not good enough to have an absolute mortgage on his spot. And a lot of people have cried out for him to go earlier, but I think this is about the right timing.
Look, it's on the back of 5 weeks where he's been down on what he produced at the start of the year. And I was a critic at the start of the year. I certainly had shifted in favour of keeping him in the side. But when we've come up against the tough times, it just seems like he's a bit of a non-factor. And I think that was the memory that stuck true from the end of last year. I couldn't remember seeing Jared Blair's influence in the back half of last year when we were really under the pump. I wouldn't go as far as saying that he's a liability, but I look at guys like a Sammy Dwyer who hasn't gotten a game this year, Ben Kennedy who's scratched and clawed for a game, and those two guys probably add as much, if not, I think in Dwyer's case probably a little bit more. He's probably a bit more versatile than Blairy. And I think those two would certainly deserve as much of a run at it as he's got. So I think you're right, it's probably about the right time. And we can see how Blair decides to reinvent himself going forward.
Yeah, I think it's not a bad message to Blairy, and I think that we need to spread it around a bit. I think the other bloke that's stiffest in a way, and I'm not his biggest fan, but I think Paddy Carnesis needs a run to see. He's been pretty solid for a long time in the twos.
Well, we'll chat about the VFL now for a few minutes. I mean, he was unlucky to miss out on the game this week, but he has been completely solid this entire time. He probably deserves a chunk of games too. I mentioned in the preview thread for this week that this was the right week for him to come in purely and play purely as a forward. And we are struggling to kick a winning score. We are struggling to get our smalls into the game. He's not a small, but he has the skill set of a small and can use the ball as well as any of our crummers can. this is the week for him. Obviously, missing last week hurt him. He didn't get the chance to put his name up, but I think it's a shame that I can't see him working his way back into the team this year, and I think that's a damn shame for him.
Yeah, I think if you tip Jesse White out, I would have thought, a 6'3", third type forward was probably the bloke he'd come in. I would really like to see him get a run at it, because I think he needs it. We need to see what he can do, because he's never going to get the chance if we don't give him at this time. He's got solid form in the twos. We need to know about him.
The two guys that really have been knocking the door down in the twos, if you read the reports and all that, have been Matt Scharenberg, but especially Jonathan Marsh. Now, Goldsack's selection last week, whilst I thought was somewhat pleasing, I also thought he'd come in underdone. And I couldn't understand why someone like Marsh, who has a very similar skill set, and then we are playing a zoning type defence. Marsh is the quickest runner at our club. And if you're going to play a zone, you need to be able to cut away from your opponent and go over the top and spoil third man style. So him not being considered last week was pretty disappointing, considering that Goldsack got the call up just coming back off an injury. But he really played well this past week. Another emergency. The VFL team's playing quite well at the moment. I think we're sitting equal fourth, which is a hell of a good thing.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't get to see the match, but I watched the replay, and I thought, Marsh actually more than Cunningham. Marsh is the one we need to see. He was really good again, and his overhead work is good. His spoiling is good. He's got that pace. He can break a line. I mean, his disposal is still questionable, but we need to know about him. And I think he would have been an ideal. I think he can really lock down on a guy if he needs to. He's just got that pace and ability to close space quickly. Scharenberg, for mine, I've got a different view from a lot of people, and I've watched Scharenberg really closely. I think he's still well off it. I think he still is very hesitant. He gets the ball, but he just chips it around, and he most of his possessions come from, running past to get a handball or a chip kick from the side or something. He's not creating a lot of play.
Yeah,
I reckon just let him build his confidence and make him sign a piece of paper.
I completely agree with you. I don't think there's any need to gift him a game. I think there's enough talented players who aren't getting games right now that would be ahead of him. I think it's. I think that's. Look, if he gets to a point in his football this year where he can hit a contest hard, where he can back it up, multiple, with multiple efforts, etc. Then yeah, absolutely. Let's swing him in for a game against Carlton and Essendon. Even I wouldn't take him up to Sydney. It'll probably be it's a tough trot. It's a tough trot in the SCG, but he's got to earn it first.
As you say, he's got to hit the contest a bit more than he is.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you know what? There'll be no prisoners in finals football. The games that we're going to come up against, the likes of Essendon, Richmond and Geelong, they're tough teams. And if he's not ready, he's not ready. We saw what Oxley might have been able to puff whatever, but this past week he was a bit too soft at the contest, and you can really see the impact that has going forward. So, no, absolutely not. I want to briefly touch on a wider AFL issue. I know we generally don't stray out of our domain as Collingwood supporters. The Adam Goodes booing saga reached its apex this weekend and this week, widespread media coverage. I'm interested to know your take on it, GC, because it has something that's permeated football as a whole.
Yeah, it's a really hard one. I think the first thing, undoubtedly in my mind, the booing has to stop now, because it doesn't matter how it started, and I'm happy to accept that in the main it didn't start from any racial reasons, and I think there's always been that thing that you're allowed to boo at people at the footy, and boo them for all sorts of reasons, and I believe most people wouldn't have started out. And Goodsy, I really like Goodsy, but I know he's a polarising character. Yep. But it's reached the point now where he says, look, I'm feeling a racial tone to it, and I'm sure that is an element now in the crowd. So once he's said that, and once he's said, it's really troubling me, there's no reason to keep booing him. And, the people saying I've got a right to boo, that's overwhelmed easily by the fact that Goods is saying, look, this is getting to me. So I think just stop booing. It's easy.
I'm certainly inclined to agree, and whilst I don't think there's as much racism laced into it as it's being beaten up to them.
Yep.
As long as someone feels that there's a racial connotation. Look, there was, and I've had a few conversations with people, and I used to go to the footy in the days where Cooter was absolutely howled at by the crowd for being, a wog and being ethnic.
Yeah.
I watched the football when Bucks was howled at for just being a talented footballer, and being called fig jam and all the extra stuff that went with it. But that's part and parcel with being a talented footballer. And a lot of people have pointed at it and said, look, these guys haven't complained about it, but because there's a potential racist element, this is a bad thing. Look, at the end of the day, it comes down to what the individual himself feels. And if he's feeling uncomfortable and threatened by it, and remember, he goes out there to work. This is his place of business, and really, you shouldn't feel that uncomfortable at work.
Yeah, and the other thing I'd say though is I think the AFL, and I think Daniel Andrews, the Premier, getting up and really putting it on the agenda has really not helped at all. I think
no,
I agree with that. It's just gone so far over the top.
Yeah, it's just become much more of an issue than it should have ever become. I wish people would just let it die a death, and if we hadn't.
I think it's got everybody feeling very, defensive about it now. It's got their backs up, and
yeah, absolutely. So when people say you have to feel this way and you must do this because I'm telling you must, people naturally arc up against that, and it's really coloured the issue and made it more difficult.
Oh, I agree. Yeah.
And the thing is that the way that it's been approached by the media makes people who, even though they might, and I say the majority aren't booing for any racial reason, it makes them. It's like they're being tarred with a racist brush, and that really offends people.
It does, and the media. I have no doubt the media look at this as a way to sell papers and ad space rather than having any real genuine interest in it. They want to stir it up as much as they can because it gives them good copy.
Yeah. Look, the message that I'd give out to the Collingwood supporters is you are entitled to do as you please, but in 2 weeks we do play the Swans, or 3 weeks. If you want to boo for him shirking a contest or going a high tackle or something, please, by all means. But if the guy's running down the wing with the ball, just let it be.
Yeah,
let's
if
make
you knock
this
someone
go.
out, you can boo him. But if he's just playing the game, don't boo him. It's easy.
Completely agree. Let's focus our attention on this week. The definition of must win. I've said it now 5 weeks in a row, I think. But against Melbourne, this is a tough game, and it's been made more interesting by the team selection. We have gone with a small lineup or small ins. But these aren't the changes that I was expecting. As we mentioned on the top of the show, I didn't expect a guy like Jesse White to be dropped. I thought we'd end up dropping one of the ruckmen for a bit of speed and maybe team balance. But we've moved out Blair, Kennedy, Oxley, and Jesse White. In come Paul Seaman, Sam Dwyer, Jamie Elliott, Taylor Adams. A bit of extra firepower, but I don't know. I think we might have gone a little bit the wrong way about it.
Yeah, the biggest worry to me is exposing Darcy Moore as a 3-game player. And, he was great last week, and you love his athleticism and that, but also he only had 9 possessions.
Yeah.
And, he won't kick 5 goals again. He might kick no goals this week.
That's right.
And I think if the ruckman kick no goals and he kicks no goals, that's going to be a big ask for the small guys to kick a winning score.
This is a young man who now kicked over 30% of our score last week. That can't be expected of him. Week in, week out. There needs to be a second tall up there, at least to take the pressure off, at least to take, and that's what Jesse White was doing. I think that this idea that Jesse White, is meant to be the second tall forward is so misguided. Now, he's a third tall at best that should be picking off the low-hanging fruit in terms of the weakest defender and really exposing someone athletically from the opposition backline. Grundy did play well last week, clanking a couple, and he will kick more goals as he goes forward. But Witts and Grundy aren't going to spend 100% of the time on the game. And if you gain ascendancy when Grundy's in the ruck, Witts is off the ground, you're still booting the ball into Darcy Moore 1-on-2. And that's a concern.
Yeah. Look, I think ruckman kicking goals is a bit of a fallacy. I actually looked them up a little while ago, just out of interest, to look at, the goal kicking ruckman, how many goals do they actually kick? Your Paddy Riders, your David Hales and these sort of blokes, they only average 1 goal a game in their career. They're not a big source of goals. And, I think Grundy and Witts will be good for half a goal a game. And if they do that, they'll be doing what Sandilands and Cox and Nat Nui and these sort of guys do. So I think we're just kidding ourselves if we think they're going to be the goal kickers. So that leaves it all to Moore as a big man, and I think it's just unfair on him.
I think with the setup that we've got at the moment, I think I posted about this a couple of weeks ago. Going forward, you'd like between the pair of Grundy and Witts, if they were the long-term pair going forward, you'd like 30 goals between them.
Yep.
Over a season, and if you're getting that, then you can justify and you've got obviously no matchup issues and dominating in the ruck, whatever. But if you get that sort of output, you can justify having the two in there as opposed to a pinch hitter like a White. But overall,
is it only form that White's gone at? Do you think, or do you think there's a niggle of some sort?
I think it's form. I think it might be a message being sent. If it was a niggle, I think it'd be listed. But the fact that it's clearly stated as omitted, I think it's more of a message being sent and saying they're not good enough.
Mm. It's a bit of an odd time, though, as you said. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a surprise. It doesn't quite make sense to me. But.
So, what are your thoughts going forward into this game, GC? I mean, 5 losses in a row is something we haven't seen for a while.
Yeah, well, as you say, each week it becomes a bigger must-win, and this is an absolute must-win. If we're to lose this week, then pretty much finals are done, and also pretty much all the good work of the early season is tipped out the door, and we're really back into the lower part of the teams in the competition. So, we can't afford to lose to a team like Melbourne, Buckley, to progress this team, in this season, these are must-win matches. You can't tip them. You can't not win these matches.
The strange thing is this isn't a conversation we thought we'd be having 5 weeks ago, but just in order to break even with last year, we still need to win 3 games, and we didn't hit 5 losses in a row last year despite all our poor form. So this is it's almost uncharted territory for a young listener, for still quite a young coach. We
had worse injuries last year in the second half of the season.
Absolutely right. So this is pivotal. I think we'll win because I think we're better than Melbourne, and I think that sort of gets me over the line. But you don't know what's been done to the psyche of the player to come in and off such a confidence high at the start of the year. What's it like now? It's going to be curious to see what side runs out.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I think it's just simple to say, well, we have to win this match.
Absolutely. It is definitely a must-win. I think we'll call it a night there as we are running a bit out of time. But I want to encourage everyone who hasn't had a chance to listen to the latest exclusive interview with Scotty Burns, please do. Personally, it was just a massive pleasure to talk to him. As Laurie Holden will express to you on the board, I was giddy with anticipation and excitement.
A bit of hero worship.
You have no idea. But
Can you confirm that for us now, Laurie?
Yeah, he was super excited.
I was super excited, and despite all the technical difficulties, and I was just shattered when we couldn't get in touch with him the first time, but we got there. It was so good. It's a great interview, great man, very generous with his time, and all the makings of It's funny. You talk to some of these guys, and talking to him, you're like, this guy's got the right vision for the club and the right attitude for the place, and it was just such a privilege. So
it strikes me as being a similar sort of guy to Bucks.
Yeah, very much so, and very humble and very modest. Described his year of captaincy as a placeholder, waiting for other guys to develop. Not wanting to fill Bucks' shoes. It was just very, very. It was very interesting talking to him. So. Please have a listen if you hadn't had the chance to. It's my favourite interview.
Great interviewer and great interviewee.
Well, look, the interview is only as good as the interviewee. So I was just very privileged to be asked and happy to do it. Thank you, Magpie Girl, for all your multitasking this evening and all your tireless work getting the interview up for people to listen to.
Thanks, Mighty T.
And GC, thanks for coming on, mate. It's been good chatting, and hopefully we can get a win this weekend.
Yeah, go the Pies and go the move, MG.
Thanks. I won't even get to the football on Saturday. I suppose I should be excited about what I'm doing, but
Yeah, well, you will be next week.
I will be next week. That's right.
Well, you'll be back to tell us all about it next week, I guess.
Okay, I'll be talking to you from a different place.
Well, that's exciting to me.
Yes.
But for now,
Geographically.
but for now, this is the Mighty T signing out.